Great. Okay. Okay, so I've cut out several of the slides, and there's some parts that I'm going to skip over, but it'll give you a sense of it, and it'll give you, I think, a good overview of the Poor People's Campaign. We're going to address, who is the Poor People's Campaign? Why is there a Poor People's Campaign? What is it about? And how are we doing it? How are we mobilizing? Oh, shoot. Let's do that. I don't know why it's not moving forward. Okay. 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 The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is made up of people of all backgrounds. We are Black, brown, white, Native, and Asian. We are old and young. We are Christian, Sikh, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim. We are people of faith and not of faith. We are people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. We are led by poor people, and we are a cross-class movement. And we live in every region and state in the country. We are grassroots from the states up, but we also include over 100 national sponsors and 15 denominational and national faith body endorsements, and thousands of moral and faith leaders. The first Poor People's Campaign was started by Dr. Martin Luther King, and Romy covered that well, in 1968. And in 2018, 50 years later, co-chairs Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris picked up on his unfinished work to build a broad fusion movement that could unite poor and impacted communities across the country. Music has been an integral part of the Poor People's Campaign from the beginning. One of our theme songs was originally written for the 1968 Poor People's Campaign by singer-songwriters Jimmy Collier and Reverend Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick, who recorded it just prior to the assassination of Dr. King. Here's our current hip-hop version of it, and several of you have been at our actions and you have heard it, but we always start with music, so we are going to.
Because this campaign is paying homage to the old and the new, we think about the then and the now of a movement. We're bridging the gap between 1968 and 2018, which is 50 years of just revolution and 50 years of activism. So we also incorporated a new part that incorporates hip hop, a little hip hop aspect to it. So to bring the old with the new. So when we get to that, we'll teach you how the words flow and go.
So your words are first, everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Because everybody has a right to live. You got that?
You got that.
All right.
And so then the second part will be everybody's got a right to live. And then you all will say to live. And then everybody's got a right to love. To love. Everybody's got a right to dream. To dream. Everybody's got a right to learn. To learn. Got it? All right. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to learn. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to do. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Because this campaign is paying homage to
We have a new website, WashingtonPPC.com, where we have arts and culture and music album where all kinds of good music can be found if you click on it. So why a Poor People's Campaign? I'm going to skip a short video, Jubilee video, because you already know it, and in the interest of time, but so that you know, this that 4-minute video gives a very nice overview for people who aren't familiar with the Poor People's Campaign of what the major issues are. But I'm going to go on and talk about them anyway here, so I will not show that, but it's 4 minutes. It's nice. And but the key, why a Poor People's Campaign, a key premise is that we cannot solve any one of the 5 evils: poverty, racism, a war economy, environmental injustice, and the distorted moral narrative without solving all of them and changing their underlying structures. They are interlinked and inseparable. We are a fusion movement aimed at breaking down the silos and other divisions that have splintered social movements and hindered their progress. We also need to build the power of the people most affected by these problems to counter those at the top who have rigged the rules in their favor. So what are the Poor People's Campaign goals? There's 3 main goals: to shift the narrative, build power, and to impact elections and policies. A short recap of what is the Poor People's Campaign that sums it up. It's a national movement that is state-based. It is a movement, not an organization. It's research and fact-based. Everything that's put out in terms of policies is well-researched. They don't just pull facts and figures or make things up. It centers the voices of impacted people. We are nonpartisan, but very political, committed to nonviolence, and the movement is based on fundamental moral principles. There are 12 of them, and we use moral fusion organizing. So how are we building the movement and making change? From growing our numbers, to mobilizing our base, to organizing protests on a local, state, and national level, to advocacy, we organize, mobilize, and join forces to bring about change. What follows are some highlights of the polling points, our actions for change from 2018 to the present and beyond into the future. The Poor People's Campaign, the second one, the new one, was launched in 2018 with 40 days of nonviolent direct actions across the country. Poor people and moral witnesses in 40 states committed themselves to 6 weeks of direct action to launch the campaign. What ensued was the most expansive wave of nonviolent civil disobedience in the 21st century United States. It was more than a series of rallies and actions. It was the birth of a new organism of state-based movements. This collage highlights a few of the launch actions here in Washington State. I know several of you were at them. I saw you there. The launch was followed by a Truth and Poverty tour as part of the Poor People's Campaign MORE program to mobilize, organize, register, and educate people up to a mass rally in Washington, D.C. on June 20th, 2020, and onward to the 2020 election. The plan was modified due to COVID, but the movement continued to grow. On June 20th, 2020, 2.7 million people participated in the largest digital gathering of poor, dispossessed, and impacted people, faith leaders, and people of conscience ever held. 300,000 letters were sent to governors and members of Congress, and 248 mobilizing partner organizations and faith groups joined the movement. 500 Days of Fighting Forward is a nationally coordinated campaign starting February 1st of this year and will go until June 18th of 2022. It is aimed at changing the fundamental system that perpetuates the 5 interlocking injustices, not incremental or piecemeal solutions. It isn't just a series of rallies and actions, but a moral fusion, organizing, and mobilizing strategy aimed at changing the narrative and building power through several pulling points. And those are the pulling points you see there. At the beginning of the 500 Days of Fighting Forward, on March 15th of this year, the Washington Poor People's Campaign, simultaneously with similar events in 30 other states, delivered 14 policy priority demands for the first 100 days of the new administration. 15 people delivered the demands to the state capitol in Olympia, and I see some of you were there, while almost 100 folks joined simultaneously by Zoom. Then, on May 24th of this year, the Poor People's Campaign joined Representative Pramila Jayapal and Barbara Lee when they announced a congressional resolution titled Third Reconstruction, fully addressing poverty and low wages from the bottom up. The Third Reconstruction draws on the first radical Reconstruction following the Civil War, when between 1866 and 1877, African Americans began businesses and became involved in local and federal governance, and the second Reconstruction of the civil rights struggles of the 20th century. The Third Reconstruction is a revival of our constitutional commitment to establish justice, provide for the general welfare, end decades of austerity, and recognize that policies that center the 140 million poor and low income people are also good economic policies that can heal and transform the nation. After the launch of the resolution, the Poor People's Campaign worked to realize it in Congress and across the nation. On Moral Monday, June 7th of this year, the Washington Poor People's Campaign joined more than 50 simultaneous actions across the country to demand that their members of the U.S. House of Representatives embrace the resolution. We delivered the resolution to the offices of 4 of Washington's 10 congressional districts. And then on June 21st of this year, hundreds of thousands of people online joined the Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Mass Assembly and announced 365 days of fighting forward to a massive moral march on Washington, which will occur on June 18th of 2022. I'm going to show you the call to action for that June. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, here we go. This is our current call to action, the 365 days building to June 18th, 2022, if it will play. Okay. I had this problem before, so what I'm going to have to do is try it another way, but we'll do it this way.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and moral march on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022. We are a new, unsettled force, and we are powerful. A new, unsettled force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still voices in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed. We need the Third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck. Justice is coming soon.
Do you believe that today?
So the call to action, building to June 18th, 2022, where the goal is to bring 50 people from Washington State to Washington, D.C., and thousands more to actions locally and possibly online. So how can people as individuals get involved, to be part of this, to build towards this mass March on Washington, the equivalent of the 1963 March on Washington in 2022. Get people to read, learn, and register by going on the national website, participate in Moral Mondays, ask people to come to our open house the first Monday of each month. Go to actions, many of you are already doing that. Connect with us on social media, contribute. We're going to be raising money to send impacted people to Washington who can't afford to make the trip without being subsidized. Recruit others. We're going to ask you tonight if you'll consider being a mobilizing partner. Join with others to create a regional committee. We have some dialogue going on now in Bellingham to start a regional committee there. We're starting a Seattle regional committee. We have a Grays Harbor regional committee, a Lower Columbia, the southwest part of the state is already a regional committee. We're looking at the Northeast Corridor, Bothell. So if you know people who live places where they might be interested in that, but our pitch to you tonight is for you to consider as a chapter different chapters in the state to become a mobilizing partner. That means this. It's very easy and very simple. That means you allow us to put your name on our website, and we build power by showing the force of uniting all many organizations and faith groups. You identify a contact person who will receive information to pass on to your constituents and can pass information on to us so we can put your actions in our monthly newsletter. We ask people, mobilizing partners, to put our actions in their newsletters and bulletins, and to attend, encourage your members to attend actions and to become involved in whatever ways they can. Right now we have, we're just in the process of signing up mobilizing partners. I think we have 17 or so are listed on our website right now, but we have more that we'll be adding. I think it's in the 20s now. So sign up, get involved. When you sign up, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to that. When you sign up on the national website, when you register, you put in your address and your zip code. That immediately puts you on our action network. And then you will get our monthly newsletter, and you'll get any action calls to action that we send out. And if you have any questions after tonight, we're going to open it up for questions and dialogue and discussion now, but you can always write to us at washington@poorpeoplescampaign.org. And our newly designed and beautiful, I think, since my stepdaughter did it, website is www.washingtonppc.org. So with that, that gives you an abbreviated view of a slideshow that gives you an overview, and that if you're interested, you could use, you're welcome to use it. So that's my part. Romy, did you have something now to add? And then we'll open it up. You want to facilitate the discussion? Or?
All right, thank you, Dorothy. And yes, let's open it up for questions, comments, conversations. Are people able to unmute themselves, Mary, if they need to?
Yeah, Mary Margaret.
I'd like to thank you so much, Dorothy and Romy, for coming. I'd like to go over the 1, 2, 3 steps. If Seattle, are you asking Western Washington FOR, or are you asking specifically Seattle chapter?
We're interested in every chapter signing up.
But you would,
or it could be however you're organized, whatever works best for you. Yeah, like give me an example. Indivisible. We have 3 chapters of Indivisible who have signed on as mobilizing partners because they're located in different areas. So I know there's an FOR in Olympia, right? So if there were, go ahead.
So the way we're organized is that we have several chapters, and then we have a regional council that everyone belongs to. So we could all, so we could join as a regional council, but we can also join as chapters. So
okay.
We'll take you either way. We'll take you one way or all ways.
Well, I think probably the chapters could might come first. The regional council has its meetings every 2 months, and we have just had one, so we won't be having another meeting until January.
Okay.
But the chapters, individual chapters, and I know that someone from the Olympia chapter is on this call, and so we could each of us could discuss it and decide what we want to do, and both Jean, who's not Bob, but and me and myself are on the regional council, so we can bring it to them at our meeting in January.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Yeah.
You know, the idea is building the people power. And, you know, when you see on a website, if you go to the national website, you see hundreds of mobilizing partners, hundreds of them, unions, churches, organizations like FOR. And it's all about looking at this fusion organizing, that we're all in this together. So we would invite you and welcome all of you in your chapters to consider signing up.
Well, I was on the way to saying, I don't believe that this gathering this night on the 21st of November it wouldn't feel right for me to say, I think Western Washington should be a chapter, but I would like to say that I personally would like to see the Seattle chapter consider this. And Mary, how would we, I'm not assuming that we have done it or are going to do it, but how many people would we feel would have to vote in order for us to make a commitment? And then question number 2 is, I didn't hear you make any pitch for a certain amount of money.
No money.
We need to contribute.
No money.
No, I saw other things that you like affiliates to do, like be nonviolent and attend Zooms and so forth. But actually,
there are, Mary Margaret, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there are 2 very important conditions. One is, if you look, your organizations, groups need to look at the 12 fundamental principles of the campaign. They're on the website, on the homepage. And if your organization is aligned with those principles and you're comfortable that they are, I know you are, but you can look at them. We require organizations and groups to look at that and say, we are aligned with those principles. And then there's the covenant of nonviolence, and an organization doesn't sign that, but when you encourage your members, or when you as members participate in actions, we ask that you, at that point, during meetings, planning meetings, would be asked to sign a covenant of nonviolence. I think there's 10 things that you agree to do to remain nonviolent during the action.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Did that answer the question you wondered about conditions?
Yes.
Okay.
Brenda has her hand up. You're muted, Brenda.
Okay, so yeah, of course, we will have a committee to nonviolence to belong to FOR. So,
right.
So
right.
that is not an issue. What in something I looked at, it sounded like you are expecting somebody from each organization to go to meetings. But when you were talking about being a liaison to, which could be done by just getting the information. Because I am not, all of us are busy people, and so I'm not.
No, there's no requirement to go to regular meetings, but we do ask to have a contact person. So, for example, if we're going to do an action down at the federal building, we can send an email to your contact person and say, hey, if you want to spread the word. And that person, if you have something going on that you want us to put in our newsletter, that person can contact us to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can find someone for a contact person. I'm just, especially if all the chapters are doing it individually, committing to having someone to attend meetings is much more difficult.
No. Yeah. Now, our regional committees, different areas of the state, we will be wanting one person from each regional committee to be on the coordinating committee, but that's a whole different level.
Yeah.
Mobilizing part, it's a pretty easy ask actually, but it's part of the people power to show if you have hundreds of groups and faith partners and mobilizing partners, and you just seeing that is a way of saying, making a declaration, and we're in this together, we're united, we're not broken up into interest groups, we're all working for the same thing. So there's power in that. Jonathan.
Thanks. Good to see you, Dorothy. So most of my activist work is with Native Americans, and I looked both on. I saw there was one Native spokesperson at one of the rallies talking about the need for better housing, better jobs, and so on, which everybody else was also saying. But I went to look at the state organization's website and saw no list of any of the current organizing partners at all. I'm very interested to see if any tribes have signed up or are considering signing up. And, so I can go to the organizations I work with and say, there's already interest among Native Americans in our state. So what do you know about that?
Romy, do you want to take that one?
Well, yeah, I did. So I think that is an arena that we want to reach out further and develop those relations and contacts. There has been Native folks who have participated in some of our gatherings, to share their story, but that in terms of on an ongoing organizational level, in terms of a tribal, I don't believe we have any at this moment that we, that is said, yes, definitely as a tribal organization, a nation, that we are wanting to have that connection. So I think it's an ongoing process to really have those conversations, and how would that actually look like in terms of partnering?
Jonathan, I'd love to talk to you more about the contacts you have and the organizations you're involved with, and find out ways we can have a dialogue to build that interest. You'll notice also that we don't have any unions on the list yet, but boy, we've got a lot of labor groups that are very interested in following the Poor People's Campaign. So we just started to gather, reach out and gather up. So you could be very valuable if you choose to help in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I want to respect people's time. We're a little bit over. But I just would like as we will have a meeting soon, within a couple weeks, of our steering committee. But I would feel much more comfortable just to have a show of hands of people who would support our becoming an organizing partner. And just if people could put their hand up and like this, maybe wave a little bit, just so that we don't feel like, as the steering committee of the chapter, that we're, not taking the views of the group as a whole into account. So I appreciate your clarity about the time commitment, because that does matter a great deal. But as I said in the intro, respect your awareness of how the issues are intertwined, and how we need to continue to create bonds amongst the groups that become organizing partners. I just feel that so strongly. And, again, going back to the comments at the very beginning, I hadn't lived in Washington State very long, maybe 2 years, when the Jackson campaign came along, and it made such a difference to come into a state through an experience like the Rainbow Coalition, and getting to know people like Romy, and getting to feel that vitality. And I just can't, I am so grateful that that was my political introduction, was both the Seattle Fellowship of Reconciliation, where we had something called Washington Euro Missile Action Network, where we were dealing with nuclear weapons issues as FOR, and then to go into the Jackson campaign at that time had a good, strong critique of militarism. And so it was a wonderful sense of not being in silos, having a way of differentiating issues without having competing silos. So this is most welcome, extremely most welcome. And thank you to everyone who came tonight. And keep an eye out for Jean Buskin's calendar for messages from Western Washington Fellowship of Reconciliation, where our Seattle chapter events are always listed, and where we can also be listing Poor People's Campaign events in that calendar. So Jean
Delastrada, yeah.
Yes.
I'm from Olympia, and I will be glad to bring this up to our steering committee, which meets on December 8th, and look at the website and get more information. And we also work closely with the Tacoma chapter, and I can let them know about the situation. And is there someone they can contact if they want more information, since they're not represented here tonight?
Yes.
Dorothy.
Just go to our washington@poorpeoplescampaign.org email. I'm on duty. I read all the messages and respond to them, so I will get them.
We've been very interested in the Poor People's Campaign, and certainly want to. It sounds like it's a reasonable commitment to be mobilizing partners.
You folks were very helpful when we did the action in Olympia. I think Jonathan and Rosie went down there in person when we delivered the 14 policy priorities, and you helped to bring people out in Olympia. We appreciated that.
That was a wonderful thing to have something to do in person, you know, in these times. So yeah, it was memorable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to say one final thing. When you asked, we are all busy people, and we all, I know, just tend to get overextended. I always like to say what we had a slogan when we started Women Against Military Madness, and that was, no action is too small.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you just talk to your neighbor and say, hey, have you heard about the Poor People's Campaign? Oh, check it out. That's an action. Yeah, takes
absolutely. Yeah. We're very very flexible, and understand, you know, people have ongoing commitments and efforts that people are making, and we want to folks know that we are flexible, and that this is not about creating another layer of organization, but it's more kind of broadening the agenda that people have in terms of seeing these connections. So I just want to say thank you for your time and long attention tonight, and truly appreciate all that you've done and continue to do, and look forward to working further together.
Same here, and thank you for inviting us, Mary Mark.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll see you in December. Okay, take care.
Have a nice